almost inching towards the end of this very dynamic year that we've had across all markets, particularly oil and all commodities. Lots to talk about today. I'd like to welcome three of our regular guests: Narendra Taneja, India's leading energy expert; Matt Stanley, partnership lead for the Middle East at Kipler; and Daniel Rahmat, senior energy security consultant. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for joining us. Narendra, let me start with you. Happy Diwali again, as I said, and let's talk a little bit about the demand story and oil prices. We've seen some action since we had last had you on the show. We've seen OPEC's decision to cut output to support prices, essentially. And India, of course, being one of the biggest consumers. Where's your stance on that? Looks like OPEC's doing whatever it takes to support this approximate $90. Indian economy seems to be doing really well. Everyone's saying it is the only hope in town.
Well, first of all, happy Diwali to you and to all your viewers. Yes, I mean, OPEC decision was kind of came as a bit of a surprise and a bit of a shock, yeah. But when you look at the overall picture, we think that your world is supply side. We don't see many major concerns. On demand side, we see like in India, demand is back to almost normal, and we will continue to grow at 3% per annum, as has been the case the last few years, and that's probably will continue at least for another 15 years, if not beyond 15 years. And the overall economy is doing very well. Diwali is always a big boost because the demand goes up, and that will continue until Christmas. So next coming 7-8 weeks are good for Indian economy in terms of demand of petroleum products and so on and so forth. And overall, when you look at the crude oil prices globally, I mean, we will not say India is very comfortable, but we are not complaining too much. If it remains in the region of $90, $92 per barrel, I mean, that's not a very big worry. This is something India can handle. Of course, we would like to see oil at $80 per barrel. Anything more than $80 per barrel is a burden on the economy. But that said, at the same time, if we continue to grow at 6%, 6.2%, close to 7%, then I think it's quite manageable. But the important thing is that there should be no supply disruption. So we don't see any supply disruption. We see the market is well serviced. And at the same time, even the natural gas story is slightly different. There is no shortage of gas the way we see it from New Delhi. But there might be some concerns in terms of supply in coming winter. But our interactions with Western powers, mainly the United States and the European Union, our interactions basically are suggesting we don't need to worry too much even about the winter. In the sense the West is taking care of the supply. There might be slight disruptions here and there unless Ukraine situation goes completely out of the control, which means that for big consumers like India, whether oil or gas, are heavily dependent on imports. For oil, roughly 86%, natural gas, roughly 54%. So we think that we don't need to worry too much. It looks like the winter is going to be okay. We were worried, but today, the situation, we don't need to worry too much. But at the same time, geopolitics, you never know what happens over Ukraine tomorrow. We don't know. But today, the situation is that Diwali has been great. The economy is doing very well. And we look at the oil and gas horizon globally, we seem to be kind of comfortable.
Okay, great. Matt, so good morning to you. Let's talk a bit about that, being very comfortable with supply. This whole panic about supply is out of the market. It's more demand concerns right now in terms of what's going to happen to demand as we go forward, particularly on gas. Narendra just mentioned oil and gas. Let's talk a bit about gas. Lots of storage in Europe, ships lining up to come into Europe as apparently, and prices are dropping. So is the panic over?
No, morning, and happy Diwali to everyone. No, look, I just want to touch on what Narendra said. India mobility is back to its highest before the pandemic. It's 30% higher than it was in February 2020. Mm-hmm. We see the data that we've compiled that next month Indian gasoline demand will be a record, be at about 850,000 barrels a day. So, look, it's again this fracturing of where recovery is sitting. India, the Middle East, Brazil, parts of the US are doing very well, but Europe, on the other hand, is really struggling, is facing a bleak winter. The reason that there's gas piling up in Europe is because, look, it needs it. The infrastructure isn't there because of the Nord Stream 1 pipeline being shut down. So the only way you can bring gas into the EU is via a big ship. And when they start drawing down on those products, look, market dynamics would say that if there's enough of something and not that much demand, then the price of that very thing goes down. Inherently, the dynamics of the fundamentals are the same. Europe is still facing a gas crisis. It's not about what's sitting offshore Rotterdam or the EU right now. It's what will come in to replace that and those ships within the next month that the market is really going to concentrate on. It's a respite right now. Look, Narendra wants oil at 80. I'm not sure his OPEC mates do, if I'm honest. I think they much prefer it at 90. This time last month, 26th September, Brent was trading at $84 a barrel. We're 10% higher than that now. It's clear that there is, whether it's a direct agenda from OPEC is ambiguous, and I'm not sure they would ever agree, ever acknowledge that. But 90 seems to be the floor that the OPEC and the GCC core specifically want to maintain. Gasoline margins are making a comeback. They've been fairly weak for the majority of the year. Diesel, on the other hand, is what's the polite word of saying it? Not doing very well. Let's say that. Diesel demand because of industrial use across Europe is weak, and that's only going to stay that way because people, they're facing these recessionary headwinds. Essentially, gas is going to drive the energy complex higher come Q4, and we're a third of the way into that now. But Brent remains well supported at 90 by funds and by OPEC.
Okay, well, we'll come back and talk a bit more about that. I wanted to talk to you a bit about European policy towards also all this stuff. Daniel Rahmat, welcome again. Let's talk a little bit about OPEC again, OPEC policy. We know what they did, but what about the war of words that we're seeing between Saudi and the US? We have the Saudis this week saying, beware of using your stockpiles to manipulate the oil price or control it. And of course, that's what they're doing with their cuts. Is it going to come to anything, this back and forth? And how do you interpret Saudi's sort of outward, I suppose, teasing of Biden? They've done what they've done. Why are they still sort of out there attacking the US on what it's doing with its SPR?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to say hello to everybody, and I'm very glad to be here. Look, I would like to approach this question, by using two manners of actually 2 points of view. The first one is the geopolitical view towards the markets and the threats which are imposed to the market, and actually the geopolitical wise issues and what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and elsewhere, and also the military crisis going on in the Middle East. Please consider that if Saudi Arabia or other OPEC countries, including the UAE, produce as much as they can, if there is no spare capacity, they will be remarkably and significantly vulnerable against any Houthi military attack on their infrastructure. So there is no spare capacity to be replaced with that. So normally and rationally, these two countries, the Saudi and the UAE, are going to consider they should have a remarkable amount of spare capacity to replace with any intentional disruption in their production. This is the first point. The second point in this regards is if, for example, the militias in Yemen know that there is no spare capacity in the Saudi Arabia, they will be more encouraged to damage the oil industry in case of any military clash or any threat between the both sides. I'm not sure what the situation is right now there, but last week there was a drone attack on an oil terminal which was intercepted in Hadramaut in Yemen. So the threat is still alive, and Saudis very well know about it, and also the UAE. So they're not going to produce as much as they can. This is the geopolitical wise term. The second one, we recently witnessed that the natural gas prices are declining sharply in the Europe because lack of infrastructure, the storage is almost filled, and blah blah. But who could predict this in August that you're going to have such a sharp decline even before the Russian invasion to Ukraine? Despite the lack of, actually the shortage of gas deliveries to the EU, we can see that the prices are coming down. So in terms of the market fundamentals, not exactly the same, but the oil market can follow some similar pattern. So because we're not sure about how Chinese consumption is going to increase, whether there is going to be any real increase or not. On the other hand, we are very worried about the global economic recession. So for keeping the prices in a sort of, and please consider that there is no remarkable new investments in North American oil drilling, oil actually production sector. These are all signs that showing that the markets are very volatile in terms of their long-term sustainability of the prices. So if you want to guarantee your investments in the Middle East, you need to ensure the investors and the MPCs that there is going to be a sort of range for the prices. So what Saudi Arabia is fighting for is both the concerns that they have regarding geopolitics, and on the other hand, the fundamentals of the market are not that concrete that they can rely on.
Yeah, on the fundamentals, exactly. There seems to be plenty of supply and no disruption at the moment from Russian oil, yet it might filter through next year. Interesting, it sounds like that geopolitical argument for OPEC is a stronger one in terms of having spare capacity, and if they don't, what that would lead to. Narendra, back to you. Let's talk a little bit about China. Obviously, you're in India, but let's talk about China. You've been quite vocal about where they're going in terms of their global position and what the US and West should be doing to counter that. We, of course, had the Congress last week and the speeches that came out of that, and more assertion there of sort of that China's going its own way, and no indication of any toning down of the rhetoric towards the US, etc. So again, from an oil energy demand point of view, it doesn't look like China is going to be coming back to the rescue for oil prices, let's say, or demand. Would you agree with that?
My view is slightly different in the sense, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has triggered, a complete realignment of global energy order. And the way we've known global oil market, for that matter, even the gas market, I think is going through massive realignment, which means the way we have known it, that's probably is soon going to be history, maybe in 3 to 4 years. And the process already started in the sense that, Russia is trying to find its own footprint in terms of new buyers, and China probably assisting Russia to the extent is things is strategically, it fits the bill. And at the same time, China is kind of going in between. On the one side, China is supporting Russia to find a new market, but at the same time, China does not want to be seen as anti-West at this stage because it's a bit too early. But what we have seen in China in the last few days, the re-election for the third term of probably for life of President Xi Jinping as the president, that means we will see a new China. A new China means which is more hostile, which is probably is not kind of follow a completely different line, not only on Taiwan or Japan or India or Central Asia or Iran or Middle East and all that, but basically, going in head-on kind of confrontation with the United States, but not a military one, not yet, because China is not ready there. China is not there yet. China still needs the West. So it will play on.
All to the detriment of its economic plan, isn't it? I mean, in the sense that China's in trouble, relatively speaking, and they don't seem to be moving forward to support their economy and the hit that it's taken this year.
Well, for politicians world over, China is no different. For them, their own agenda, political agenda, always comes first and economy later. We have seen that in Russia. We're seeing that, in many other parts of the world. We see in countries like Hungary. We see even in the United States when President Trump was in power. We see that now in China. In China, probably right now, the agenda of the Chinese president is to basically, arouse this nationalism, and so that he can get every single Chinese behind him, and to recreate the party, go back on the left in the sense more Marxist Communist Party. So that agenda is more important than the economy. And the economy, they feel that they are in a position now that they will continue to kind of strengthen the army, armed forces. And basically, when you say that you challenge the United States, you get every single Chinese behind you. It works. It's politics. And I think, so my point here is that will have its own economic consequences, also in terms of demand for oil, demand for other natural resources, and China is heavily import dependent as well. So I think what we are going to, as I said, realignment has begun. It was triggered by Ukraine, now it's triggered by China, and oil and gas world, as we have known the last 30 years since the early 90s, is actually in for a major shift. It will not happen overnight, but for oil and gas sector, especially big consumers and market as a whole, the coming 10 years are going to be extremely challenging.
Matt, just to talk about China and products. Of course, it's been having these quotas that have limited its exports of products into the region mostly. Some talk recently that those will be eased. Where's that sort of where's the market view on that in terms of what impact that could have on prices in the coming couple of quarters if those quotas are eased?
Well, I mean, Q4 they're looking to ramp up China, and I echo what someone said in the Fujairah Gulf Intelligence Forum, which was great. I think that we will see a division in terms of supply and where it's originally come from. I think arbitrage, moving a cargo from east to west that the market is historically known for so long will not fall away, but will lessen. So I think China will cover the majority of the diesel demand specifically for Southeast Asia and Japan. And I think that the Middle East will step up, new refining capacity that's coming online over the course of the next 6 months or so with Kuwait and Duqm in Oman and the new Jizan refinery in the Red Sea, that will step up and replace lost Russian supply. And it will be, look, it's not a new world order, Diallo. It's not that dramatic. It's not like UK politics. I'm not sure anything is more dramatic than UK politics right now. But in terms of what's happening in terms of supply and where it comes from for Europe, it will change. Flows will change. From the 5th of February next year, no products from Russia can be imported into the EU. So that's a good thing for the West Coast Indian refiners. Narendra knows them, the guys at Reliance. They will pick up some of that slack. So will the Middle East. It's just, China will look it's third of the world, if you like. It's straight down, longitudinally, and will supply the majority of Southeast Asia with the diesel that it needs.
What about US refineries? They have turnaround season, hurricane season looking a bit tight there. How's that going to impact global prices?
Well, again, I think it's there's a couple of things there. LNG exports this year for the US Gulf Coast exporters has been excellent. I mean, they're printing money. Cheniere can't get the stuff out into Europe quick enough. And again, it's a story, regarding consumption within the US of an insular one. It's same as China. The US demand is coming back. Yeah, they're facing recessionary headwinds. I keep on reading about a recession, but it seems like the recession that's never going to be a recession. Everything seems okay. So I don't know. I'll probably eat those words in a couple of months. I usually do. But inherently, US refiners are making money. US gasoline margins are coming back. Diesel is still pretty weak. Jet fuel demand is certainly there. I was in the States last week and it was busy. People are out there spending money. It's not, keep your wallet shut, boys. It's get out there and spend it. I think that appetite is still very much there. Q4 looks strong, and I don't see that dissipating coming into next year. So, look, it's very much an insular story rather than a global one in terms of where arbitrage is coming into play. Europe is still the pull, especially on gas, and that's driving the whole energy complex up. So the US refiners are sitting happy.
Okay, Daniel, just to talk about Iranian production and just an update, anything that you're hearing on, obviously, there's these nuclear talks with the US have kind of sent again back to the back burner. The US has got its midterm elections coming up. Nothing's going to be done, obviously, before that. But what's the latest on the ground, if you like, in Iran? And also the protest seems to have quietened down as well. So from that pressure point of view and how that plugs into the whole Iranian stance on negotiating, where are we with that? Any closer, or is that sort of, let's forget about extra Iranian oil for the next couple of quarters?
Iran's oil production has been on a sort of steady increasing track, but the slope is very, very, very low. Actually, 1 year, actually last year, at the same time, I believe that Iranian production is going to reach 2 million barrels, even despite the sanctions. But but the U.S. stopped the trend of easing the sanctions on Iran despite the lack of oil in the market. So the shortage of oil in the market. At the moment, Iranian oil production is something about 3.5, 3.7 something, but the export does not exceed 1.2 million barrels per day. Some domestic officials say that it's now 1.5, but I have serious doubt about it. Regarding the domestic production of products, the products actually, especially diesel and gasoline production, decreased significantly based on some news, and there was some probably technical interruption in some refineries, not related to the protest, because the decline started just maybe 2 months, 3 months before the protests here. There was no remarkable interruption in oil, gas, or products production as a result of the demonstrations here, but demonstrations still going on. There are concerns about if this demonstrations continues to become a sort of nationwide strike or something like that. That would be a significant threat for the Iranian, especially natural gas industry, which is the most important part in the country's actually domestic economy, and also the exports to Iraq or Turkey would be also threatened. But regarding
let me just have a look at that survey question. Sorry to interrupt, Daniel. Yeah, that's going back to Europe and its gas problems that we were addressing at the beginning. So are Europe's gas prices over? I mean, obviously for this year, with storage tanks full and prices in retreat, agree or disagree? We'll have a look at the result of that a bit later. Sorry, Daniel, just wanted to go back to Narendra about Iranian and Russian oil supplies into India. Are those, I mean, Iranian are negligible, but less so. But Russian oil supplies, how is that progressing? Are we still seeing the discounts that India is very happy to receive, and any concerns there of Russian oil becoming less available in the next quarter?
Well, good question. You see, first, Iran, we don't import any oil from Iran, due to the sanctions. Iran had been a major supplier of crude oil in the past, and we would very much like sanctions to go so that we can import Iranian oil. You know, it's the closest country to us. It's an important source, and Iran is a very close friend. Though I personally, my heart bleeds for Iranian women who are fighting for freedom. And but when it comes to Russia, you see, it's pure economics. It's nothing to do with any love for Russia or any other reason. It's just a good economics in the sense that they continue to offer a discount. Then I think we'll continue to buy Russian oil. And secondly, if there are issues with regard to finding tankers and insurance and payment, etc., if Russians can find some way without involvement of the Chinese, because we can't use the Chinese platform or the Chinese insurance or the Chinese tankers, that's completely out. But if Russians can supply us at our ports, at our refiners, I think, and offer discount at the same time, I think that will continue. Because India's stand on Russian oil is purely economic. It's just that, we are heavily dependent, and, oil prices are very important for our economy as a whole, for the maintaining of the equilibrium, and especially to protect the poor consumer. So if Russian discounted oil helps, we'll continue to buy it. I mean, if some countries want to protest, let them protest, because these sanctions are not so right now the status is we are still buying Russian oil, and there's still negotiations going on to buy further. But we are aware of the sanctions, and if the sanctions come in the way and Russians can't offer any solution, then the picture will be different. But if they can offer a solution, India will continue to buy.
Okay, Matt, let me go to you with that. Let's just look at our poll result there. Most people are disagreeing. No, the gas issues are not over, as you were saying, Matt, at the beginning of our call. But let's talk about Russian oil and discounts and prices that we're seeing in the market, and the impact of the policies around the insurance and sanctions so far, and how the discounts or the oil itself may be affected as we go forward into more talks around price caps, etc., on both oil and gas. So what are we going to just see things remaining as is, or do you see a change in that?
Well, I mean, it's Narendra is right. I mean, of course, India, the third largest oil importer in the world, of course they're going to be cost sensitive. You're running a balance sheet, and you go where the cheapest feedstock is. September last year, India bought 3 million barrels of crude oil from Russia. September this year, they bought 28 million barrels. You know, I think that will be a steady stream that India will look at. Of course, they will. Bear in mind that Rosneft own a refinery in India, you know, or majority ownership of a refinery in India, the Niara refinery. There's a couple of things, Diala. I had this argument with Sean the other week. Of course I did. Even though we love each other, we argued as well, a bit like you and him, I suppose. Price caps, they're not going to work. How you enforce those, good luck with that. What happens when Russian oil is taken offline come Q1? You see the effects. I honestly don't think anyone knows yet. I don't think that anyone is really to the point where they're like, okay, well, I've got this guaranteed source of supply. It's going to come in from other places. Russian oil production, we anticipate dropping by the end of Q1 by 3 million barrels a day, down to 9 million barrels a day. You know, that's in a market that is, let's say, just about balanced. That is a seismic drop in supply, and that will have an effect on flat price. It'll have an effect on refining margins, and of course, it'll have an effect on gas. Where the oil goes, I think, as Narendra said, I think it's very much people who will dismiss sanctions that are put in place by the US and the EU. If they're put in place by the UN, then that's a different story. Russian oil can't really go anywhere. That's a big political statement, and you know that's what's going to happen. For the time being, people who are cost sensitive, and I'm talking basically most buyers east of the Suez, they will be looking at Russian oil more and more. The argument then comes on, our freight guys are looking at something at the minute. What happens with the fleet, the Russian oil, you know, the Russian shipping fleet? Where does that go? Icebreaker vessels, Russian own the majority of those. What happens in the winter? Like I said, I know I'm adding more questions to your questions, but that is the state the market is in. This is why we're range bound between $85 and $100 a barrel, because until we really start seeing some tangible data that comes in on the actual effects of Russian oil not being supplied to the majority of the West, then no one really knows where energy prices are going to go, but it will stay high.
Okay, and I mean, do you think we'll hit that 100 soon? A lot of people are saying that's going to be the peak, if you like, at some point, and then we're going to retreat, possibly when that Russian issue surfaces, you know, or not. But you know, where we've kind of been pretty steady for the last few weeks. Some people are calling that we'll hit 100. What would make things go to 100 today? And also, I mean, we haven't even talked about the whole inflation story and rates and macro policy. We don't have time for that today. But
yeah, well,
again, how much has been factored into prices already?
Well, that's, I think, what the push and pull is, isn't it? It's one, you got one side of the argument in looking at the recessionary issues and what's happening with inflation and weak economic data. And then you've got people looking at the supply and thinking, well, there's not enough of the stuff. People who are calling $100 oil, I mean, you're not that brave if you're calling $100 oil. We're only $7.50 away from it. I mean, like I said, could we get back up to the 139 that we were earlier this year because of fear in the market? What's the difference between 2 months' time going forward to where we were in March? The same fundamental issues are there. Whether people are panicking as much, I think, has probably been priced out of the market. Could we get to 120 again? Sure. I don't see why not, but not until Q1.
Okay, and Narendra, a lot of people are saying, we'll let you have the last word, that oil is still quite cheap. I know it isn't for India at any time, but you know, compared to what we saw earlier this year, as Matt just highlighted, and compared to other commodities across the board, that oil, historically speaking, given what we're seeing geopolitically and all the disruption, is relatively cheap. What would India do if it went up back to 140?
Well, you see, I mean, it depends. I mean, when you look at from the consumer's point of view, I mean, oil is not cheap. It's very expensive. We know the cost of production in most countries, you know, we follow that very closely, actually field by field. So we think that the $90 per barrel is actually a win-win for both, for big producers, even those who are operating in ultra deep water or in the tough Arctic region. If you put all this together in one basket, I think oil is not cheap. 90 is a very good price, and I think, you know, most producers are making good money. But when you see it from the consumer's point of view, like India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, and others, or you keep Japan out, you keep South Korea out, or we think that, oil prices should be in the region of $80 per barrel. At the end of the day, if they don't, I think then we will have no alternative to push for, renewables even more aggressively, go for nuclear even more aggressively, and, hydrogen and so on and so forth. So, but overall, when we look at the picture, my sense is that probably unless something goes dramatically wrong in Ukraine or over Ukraine, then we don't know. Prices may go up to 120, 130 again. But my own sense is the coming at least 4 weeks, all prices are going to be in this region only. But when you look at the band, if you ask me to kind of my view in terms of a band of Brent, let's say between my band would be like $90 per barrel to $115 per barrel. It can range in between this. It's a broad band, but that's the band at least I share with television channels and news channels in India, that we need to look at because it's still geopolitics challenge is still there. There's a big change in China. We don't know how President Putin is going to behave further, and there are still a lot of, we also don't know about the intensity of winter. If the winter is very hard and some countries run into some kind of problems in Europe, then I think we might see a very different scenario. So there are too many questions and it's too foggy at the moment. So therefore the band, as far as I'm concerned, is $90 to $115 per barrel.
Well, certainly that push and pull remains. And of course, for Europe, we might see further demand destruction, but 90 to 115 or 10 certainly will keep OPEC Plus very happy. So they've succeeded so far. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you very much to Narendra and Daniel and Matt for joining us this morning. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.